All right, I've started the YouTube streaming just so we can get started as soon as everyone arrives. So you are on the air.
Ursa, are you providing a link on the store, on the town's Facebook page for these YouTube videos? Because I had someone ask me that they didn't see a way to link to it on the Facebook page from the one on Tuesday.
It's not on the Facebook page, it's on the website, like on the calendar. So if they go to the meeting event, Wilson's got that link for that YouTube video on there.
Yeah.
I can put the YouTube video that was done on Tuesday that's still up. I can put that on Facebook.
Someone had just asked, and I should have told them to go check the town's web page, but I was kind of also thinking that it would be on the Facebook page also. So you do, that doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think the more places we can put it up, the better.
Sure. I'm guessing that as we get more familiar, we'll expand our footprint a little bit. I think we tried to stream it on Facebook before, and we were having some technical challenges, and YouTube was just more user friendly, so we chose it. But as we get more practice, I suspect we can put it on there too. That's not what I want.
So Debbie, did Harry do the custom paint job on your golf cart?
That's just from a lot of years of dings, I guess.
How this works. Commissioner Ferguson, did you say where you wanted to send that money to? All right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4 out of 6. We'll give Commissioners Johnson and Paul another few minutes. Got 4 out of 6. We'll give Commissioners Johnson and Paul another few minutes.
Dale, you're looking very serious there.
Yes. Ready to get started.
Hey, Dale, are you in town hall?
I am.
Would you feed my fish for me sometime?
I'll go do that right now while we're waiting.
I appreciate it.
That way I won't forget.
Mayor, can you hear us? I saw his square light up, but I didn't hear anything. Mayor, can you say something again so we can make sure we can hear you?
He's muted.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let me see.
Oh, there you go.
Believe he's
Oh, there you are.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sure, sure can.
Yes.
Sorry for the delay.
No worries. We'll wait another minute or two for Johnson and on.
I tried to get this thing on my laptop, but I wasn't too successful. So, anyways, I'm on my iPhone. It's working good.
You know, when we were on the call on Tuesday, Chandler, I was looking at your picture there that you've got up. And towards the end, I, noticed that the shirt you're wearing in that picture, and I thought, I think we're wearing the same shirt, or we were wearing the same shirt on Tuesday.
Nice. Great minds think alike, right?
I think us tall guys have to buy our shirts at the same place.
Yeah, there's so few, right? You can't really be too far off. Wilson, how are your kids doing at home in the quarantine?
Well, so our cat across the street has made it a little bit easier on them. It's much easier on days where they can go outside. We got a great yard and a playground for them, and that lets them get a lot of energy out. So today's going to be a rough day because it's rainy, and I imagine they've been inside all day. The first probably few weeks went well. Caroline kept up with her schoolwork remotely, and then last week during spring break, when she didn't have that same structure, she enjoyed the work. But now the first week back, it's been harder for her to focus and do that work. So I think they've got a little cabin fever, a little, unsure what the future holds. So she's a little more grumpy than she used to be, but she's William, on the other hand, he's not school age, so he doesn't know any better, but he's developed an unfortunate habit of deciding to wake up at 3 a.m. ready to play. So he'll come in my room and not bother me. We got to go back in there and put him to sleep. And so my wife and I take turns. Fortunately, last night was her turn, but the night before it was my turn. And so I was up with him for an hour in the middle of the night. And so I'm glad we didn't have this call that day, because I might have been a little spacey from lack of sleep.
Mayor, I have a question for you on your iPhone there. You should have your Zoom screen up in front of you, correct?
I do.
All right, you see the little thing that looks like a little cog wheel? Says
On my
settings
iPad. On the iPad.
or your iPhone 1, it should have that. It'll look like a little gear wheel. Says settings on it.
Okay, hold on. Let me find that. Okay. Yeah. A little wheel. Michael, I don't see
Or do
what
you
you're
see-
talking.
Or do you see something that looks like a movie camera?
I see something looks like says start video.
Hit
All
that.
right, start video. Select that.
Okay. Says unable to access camera. Allow Zoom to access your camera from device.
Yeah.
Tell it yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm on there, but no picture. On my iPhone.
I just sent you a little message that should give you a prompt to start the video.
Now you've sent it on.
I'm not sure how it's going to look on your end, but on my end, I clicked a button that said activate or ask to activate video. And so I presume it'd be a little window or prompt or something that pops up asking you to join.
I'm a little concerned. Where's Andrew?
Yeah, I just texted him. We talked earlier. So I know he knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just talked to him about 15 minutes ago, so he said he was getting ready for it.
He may be having technical difficulty.
Maybe.
Okay, all I'm getting is just my name, no picture, but I do see you guys. So
We can hear you fine. So
I see Angela, I see Debbie, and I see Chandler, Daniel, his company, Vinoy Moore Carver Deal. And there's Connie's initial and Jeff's initial. I'm where I can hear all of you and see you, but I don't have a picture up on mine. I don't know, Michael, for something else I need to do, maybe you can tell me, but anyway. Now I'm full screen to Wilson.
okay. Well, we can't see you yet, but we
I can hear you well.
Can Andrew get text? You may need to call his home phone.
No, he's not. The number I have is his home phone.
That's
Me
the
too.
only one I've got too, Michael.
So do I need to try to call him?
No, that's Debbie. All right, we see.
I just tried to call him. His wife answered and said that he was getting ready for a meeting.
Sounds promising.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Connie. So before he arrives, I'll share with the group that I'm hoping we can cut this agenda down a little bit because the governor's going to speak at 3, and I've heard that he's going to reveal his plan to reopen the state today. So if we can accelerate through the agenda, I'm hoping we can get done by 3 o'clock. I think we can do it.
Wilson, something I was thinking about since we talked Tuesday, we were talking about how much money we might give toward the business relief fund through the EDC.
Yeah.
Okay to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay. For years, the town of North Wilkesboro actually gave the EDC $75,000 a year. And we were just trying to stimulate economic development. And so that'd be another way to look at is just slightly over what our previous gift to them was.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have one thing about that though, Debbie, that whole EDC program is kind of hinged upon the 2 other governmental bodies in the county participating. Is it possible, and I guess I'll throw this back to Wilson, can we also make it that if Wilkesboro and or Wilkes County don't come on board, because it's a countywide program, but I would like to see participation by Wilkesboro and the county, so that we're not basically funding a countywide program, when we are really trying to take our citizens' tax dollars and help them. So can you kind of put that kind of caveat on it, Wilson?
We can put as many caveats on it as we want to. I mean, it's our money. This is a discretionary thing. But I wouldn't encourage us putting a ton of caveats on it because that would reduce the effectiveness of the program. I can share with you that we had a call about it this morning, and both Ken and John Yates were on the call. They at least supported in theory. They're going to take it to their boards with the same endorsement that I've taken it to you all. And they are confident that they'll get positive reaction. It's just a matter of what their contribution could be. But they heard about what our proposed contribution would be, and they weren't, disturbed or turned off or anything by that. And so, I think that, it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to expect them to make a similar contribution in that same ballpark.
Well, I wasn't worried about how they, that's for them to figure out how to use the funds. And I'm sure they'll have some type of equitable distribution plan. But my whole thing is if Wilkesboro said no and the county said no, of course, I guess if the county says no and Wilkesboro says no, the EDC probably wouldn't be able to fund this program anyway.
No, they probably wouldn't, Michael.
We could put together a program, but it wouldn't be nearly as effective because the dollars, wouldn't be there. If the goal now is to raise between the two towns, the county and any private contributions, a pool in the six-figure range. If other parties are out and it's just us and the EDC, in the $30,000 or $40,000 range, then, we'd be able to fund 20 awardees rather than 100. So we can make it work with just about anything. It's just a matter of how effective it would be. All right, so shall we get started?
I'm good.
Mayor, why don't you call us to order?
At this time, I'd like to call the town board of commissioners to order and take up the budget session that we are going to be seated in. And I would like to open it with prayer. And I would is Andrew, are you on board?
He's not on the call yet.
Okay, then Michael, would you please lead us in the pledge after I do the prayer, sir?
I'll be happy to.
Thank you, sir. Let us pray. Our kind Heavenly Father, Lord, it's again we come to you. It's the humble hearts and open hearts, asking that you would be with us through this meeting, asking that you would guide us in the right direction for the citizens of our town, the citizens of the county. And we pray, dear Heavenly Father, that you would be with us through this crisis that we are facing. We would like to ask that you would bless each and every one that may have sickness from this, and just be with the families and heal them according to your blessed and holy will. And for any other sickness and illnesses that may pertain to our citizens, bless them also. Now we pray that you lead, guide, and direct us through this meeting. And we thank you most of all for your Son that died on the cross for our sins. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, Michael, if you would, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Michael. Please, everyone, take a seat at home or get relaxed wherever you are, and we'll get right on into the meeting. Wilson, I turn it back to you, sir.
Sure, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so like I said, I'm hoping we can compress this agenda into an hour and 40 minutes or so. I think we can do it. Let's go through a quick agenda review. There's the agenda. Again, a summary of our attachments with color-coded links. So if you're looking at this on your electronic device, you should be able to click there and it take you directly to that attachment. A summary of revenues by category, which we'll go over here shortly. We're going to focus a little bit of time on this, and this is not something we did during the general fund presentation a few days ago, but this is the capital improvement plan for the water sewer fund. This is a 10-year projection of projects and other capital expenses that we'll need to budget for. Again, these are just plans. Things may change, but this at least gives us something to work off of as we try to set our financial position for the next 10 years. And we'll go over that a little bit more later. It's 2 pages. The second page is the second 5 years, so 26 through 30. The scenarios that we'll talk about only go through FY 21 through 25, so that's on this page here. But I wanted to give the second page just so you'd have them. Again, summaries of the different areas of the water sewer fund. Dale calls them departments, I call them divisions, but essentially discrete of the water sewer fund.
Yeah, I've just got a message from Andrew. He says, hold on, he's having some problems logging in. Let me see what's going on with him. He said, I'm having a problem. It won't take my password for the meeting. I'm restarting my computer. Maybe let you know. So you guys be aware he's trying to get in.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No worries. All right, so I want to go over the sort of documents for each rate scenario here. So there's a cover page for each, and the cover page describes the assumptions that we've used for each scenario. So in this case, we used 2019 consumption figures. Those are the last audited consumption figures we have. If we included any reduction factor in our calculation, that's listed here. And I'll describe a little bit more about what that means later. Our assumption for the in-town rate change, the wholesale rate change, what it funds, and this goes back to the CIP document from earlier. When you see on the cover sheet where it says top line only, that means these. All right, so as you can see, even though those are the big ones and constitute the majority of our needs in most cases, there are more things down here. And so when we get down to the scenarios, when you see big numbers like this that look pretty good on their own, we might have 342,677 in our reserve fund. We still have all these many needs here at the bottom that we'd need to fund out of that. All right, so we'll go over that again later, but I just wanted to give that brief explanation. And then finally, a dollar impact on the average household. So this is going to be different from household to household, obviously. For some folks, it might be less. For some folks, it might be more. But the figures we used were for a average household, a family of 4, who uses about 5,400 gallons a month. All right, so back to the beginning. The impact of the coronavirus. Like the general fund, the coronavirus has thrown up a lot of uncertainty about water and sewer finances. And in some ways, it's even more uncertain because every town is different. Some towns, the majority of their base are commercial customers. Some town, the majority of their ratepayers are residential customers. We're fortunate that a majority of our ratepayers and wholesale customers are majority residential. And so that's good news because perhaps our drop in consumption won't be as big. People staying at home flush the toilet more, drink more water from the tap. And so their increased usage might check or mitigate our reduced overall consumption. So in one way, we're sitting pretty good to withstand a possible decrease in consumption across the board, because we have a significant percentage of our customers who are residential. Now, of course, a household, even with increased consumption, doesn't match the kind of consumption that goes on at a industrial or perhaps even a commercial customer. So there will be a dip overall, but having a high percentage of residential customers might mitigate that somewhat. The other thing that the coronavirus has made uncertain is the percentage of collections that we can expect to receive. The state has required, and we were going to do this anyway, but then the state required that utilities, large and small, so everyone from us to Duke Energy, waive utility cutoffs during the coronavirus crisis. I can't remember the details of it. I think it matches the governor's stay-at-home order. So it's set to lapse here at the end of the month, but I think it'll probably be extended even if the stay-at-home is not. And so without that tool, and without the deterrent of having your, in our case, water cut off, folks might be less likely to pay. And so we expect our collections to dip somewhat. The good news is that we'll make that money back eventually. When the crisis is over, and we can start cutting off again, we presume that we'll make some of that money back, but we don't know how much of that lost revenue we'll make back. So Connie, if you can share a little bit more about what you know about the collection trends, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, the not allowing us to turn the water off, I think, goes to the end of June. And last month we tried to call, Jody tried to call the people that were on the cutoff list and try to make payment arrangements. Well, that didn't go too good. Nobody came in like they said. So far, on the average, we're down about a little over $3,000 this month from what the average was for the year last year.
Okay. The state, when they issued this order, required that utilities report their losses, but there was such confusion on how that reporting was supposed to look that they've postponed that. And so we don't even have data from the state yet about the effect that this action has had, but we hope to get that soon. We hope that they'll get the reporting straightened out and they'll start collecting data from the various utilities, and we can try to quantify what the expected reduction will be.
I did go ahead and report ours, hoping that they would come up with something they would reimburse us for some losses. So because we can't, not only we can't turn the water off, we can't charge late fees or the reconnect fees. So if they decide that they'll help us any, I want them to have our information.
Thank you. So you can see that between those two pressures, our revenue collections will probably not be the same in the coming year as they have been. All right, so let's move on to revenue by category. So you can see here the various sources of revenue that the Water Sewer Fund has. Regular collections is, I don't even want to call it in town because we have a few out of town customers, but mostly are in town residential, commercial, and industrial ratepayers. They constitute about 47.7% of our revenue. Our wholesale collections, which is the water we sell to the Rural Water Association, constitutes about 43%. Now, this is revenue. This isn't water. They actually constitute about 62 or 65% of the water, but only 42% collections. Intergovernmental revenue, essentially there's only one, there is only one revenue source in this category for the Water Sewer Fund, and that's the $156,000 contribution we get from the town of Wilkesboro each year to pay down the debt that was incurred for the Kerr Scott project, and that will end after either FY21 or FY22. So that's only on our books for a couple more years. Taps and collection fees, a nominal amount of the budget. Penalties, $52,000, about 1.4%. We don't know how that'll be affected by penalties from this year being held over into the next fiscal year and so forth. But that's a small part. And then other revenue, 2.1%. This is going to be lower in the coming years. Some of this revenue was the lease payments that the cellular companies paid to put their equipment on our towers. And we've heard from them that they are changing their network model. And so we might lose some of those rent proceeds in the coming years. And then we do have a nominal amount of investment income in the water sewer fund as well. Any questions? Oh, by the way, so this projection up here, this total, $2,855,000, that's assuming a 10% drop. 10% reduction is going to be our sort of critical figure today. That's assuming about a 10% drop in collections. Any comments or questions? All right, so let's move on to the capital improvement plan or capital investment plan. Either one works. As you can see, the top line items are the things we are either already paying or are already committed to in one way or another. So you can see our projects that have been on our radar for the last year or so and that we have commitments from the state on are both included on here. One thing I want to point out that, it's the wrong one on the screen, but I had a talk with Matt Shoesmith from Kimley Horn today, and I was reviewing some of the data that he gave me. And actually this figure right here, and here comes Andrew, our local contribution to the active flow system should be about 2.6 million as an estimate. And so that's going to bump these numbers up a couple thousand in FY22 and then about 40,000 for each subsequent year. So these numbers are not quite precise, but still pretty good ballpark figures for us to talk about our scenarios later. As you can see, we have other needs. Down here, these bottom line figures are other things that we need. Again, yellow things are keep the lights on, important. Things that we have to do here in the coming years in order to be able to operate. Red, not quite as important, but still pretty important. Things that we need to do in order to meet state standards and other standards for our system. Green are things that are nice to have and also risk managers. It's more important to do these things on our own terms rather than, for example, wait for the Euclid Avenue outfall pipes to break and have to replace it in an emergency situation. So those are things that are important to do when we can afford it. And then finally, purple things are when money is available, things that we need to do, but not quite as critical as these other things. As you can see, I've left a couple of the bottom line projects in FY21. They're not included in the budget, but I've left them in here for illustrative purposes to show what, if we raise the rates, we might spend the extra money on in the coming year.
Okay.
And Dale's here to answer any questions about any of these projects if you have them.
Dale,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking at in the yellow section, UV treatment system, wastewater treatment plant. Seems like we just put that in.
Well, it's been in a while.
We did. We put it in about 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, time
That's been a
flies.
while, yeah.
It does.
No, Commissioner Ferguson, that doesn't even appear until the second half of the time period here. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're assuming in another 5 years, we're gonna need to do an upgrade to that system.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Euclid Avenue. That's a capital project that we talked about earlier in the year. It's included here in the green category, 1.3 million. When I put this together, I still felt confident that we could get help from the state on that one, but now I'm not so sure. So we'll have to see about that one, but it's not projected to be on there for another year or two anyway. I'd like to draw your attention to the assumptions here at the bottom of the page. So remember, these are very general figures. With the exception of the ones we're actually paying, we know those to the dollar. But the rest of them are estimates, and they use assumptions about the interest rate we could get and so forth. So the fortunate thing about being able to do capital projects in a recession is that both your interest rates and your construction costs are probably going to be lower. And so the silver lining is that the cost of some of these might come down if we stick with them and do them over the next few years. But, you know, that's cold comfort when the economy is struggling in other ways. All right. Any more comments or questions on this? All right. So I'll just, before we move on, I'll just emphasize that the figures you're going to see in the rate scenarios are for the top line projects only.
Wilson.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm late. I could not get in, but I did luckily. What is the one at the bottom of the yellow box, the PAYGO? What is that one?
So those are things that capital projects that I hope we can pay for in cash and not finance and pay for over the course of several fiscal years. And I think I put a PAYGO category for each division in there somewhere. I'll draw your attention here to the truck. You know, we could finance a truck, but then you end up paying half again what it actually costs to finance it. And so if you can afford it, you want to pay for those things in cash. But rather than put a line on here for every single pickup truck or whatever that we need to buy, I just lumped most of those expenses into these PAYGO categories.
Okay, thank you.
And PAYGO actually stands pay as you go. All right, I'm moving on. A quick review through the summaries here. Utility billing is Jody down here in Town Hall who accepts the payments. She's part of the finance team, but she's from the water and sewer revenue because most of her job is accepting and processing those payments. Public services is the other half of Dale's budget. We talked about general fund public services on Tuesday. This is the water sewer contribution to his budget. All right, now we're getting into the big ones here. The water plant. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what that is. They've got 5 full-time employees that work there. They have significant operating expenses. And I'll tell you that one of the most notable operating expenses for both our plants is their energy use. They use anywhere from 10 to 15, we pay anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a month in electricity just to operate those plants. We had an efficiency assessment done this year, and we found that they actually operate pretty efficiently considering the equipment they have. So there is some low-hanging fruit that we could get, but you know, it wouldn't cut this number in half or anything. And so we'll continue looking at that in the years to come, ways to make them more energy efficient. The Kerr Scott debt is housed here in this division. Water maintenance, that's David Webb's crew. You can see here their budget. Wastewater treatment plant down by Smoot Park. Their budget is as flat as it can be from one year to the next. They do have some debt service that we're trying to retire, calculated into their budget. The wastewater maintenance is essentially the contribution from the wastewater half of the house to David Webb's crew. And then provisions for contingencies. So this is the difference between the revenues we expect to receive and the expenses we expect to make. As you can see, it is smaller in the coming year than it was last year. We did have to tap into this fund last year to the tune of about $100,000 for the pipe break up on 268 earlier in the summer. All right, any comments or questions on that before we move forward? All right, moving on. So the 4 rate scenarios that I have, I put these together for illustrative purposes only to kind of demonstrate what turning one knob as opposed to another knob would do to the budget. We can fine tune these, we can make them a little bit more precise if that meets your policy goals. But for today, these are just meant to illustrate what our position would be under sort of broad scenarios. Okay, so the first one's pretty easy to understand. A do nothing scenario, keeping the rates the way that they are, dialing in a 10% reduction factor. So this is taking the revenue we would expect to receive if everything were flat from one year to the next and reducing it by 10%. This 10% reduction factor is meant to include both consumption drops and lost collections. So both those pressures are calculated into this 10% reduction. And as you can see, we'd be in the black barely in the first year. But in the second year, we'd already be operating at a deficit. By the third year, our deficit will have grown. We'll still be in the black overall because we've got a capital reserve fund that we could use to pay our debt service and the bills on our capital projects. But as you can see, that in just a few years has deteriorated to almost nothing. And then in the fourth year, even that's gone. So after 5 fiscal years, a do nothing scenario puts us in the hole to the tune of $210,000, even with our savings account. All right, rate scenario number 2. This would be an increase on our in-town customers only. Now I use in-town loosely because remember, like I said, we do have a few folks outside the town limits who pay for water and sewer as if they were in-town residents, but by and large, these are folks that live in town, pay a monthly water bill. This also includes the 10% consumption and collections reduction. And this scenario includes a 5% base and consumption rate increase for each of the next 5 years. So when you get your bill at the end of the billing period, you're actually paying 4 different things. You're paying a base rate of $9.08 for your water. You're paying a base rate of $4.59 for your sewer. So even if not one drop of water flowed through your meter, you'd be paying $14.50 or so a month. And then for every 1,000 gallons you use, and that's the typical unit of measure in this utility, you pay $3 and, oh, I don't have it in front of me, $3 and some cents for every 1,000 gallons of water, and $3 and some cents for every 1,000 gallons of sewer that you use. All right, so under this scenario, both that base rate, that $9.08, and that $3.80 or whatever it is, would go up by 5% for each of the next 5 years. So in FY21, we'd make 14,200. Oh, excuse me. The other assumption here is that we don't change the rate for our wholesale customers. So only the in-town customers would be paying the increased rate. As you can see, in the first year, we'd make about 14,000. In the second year, 125,000. Third year, fourth year, and fifth year. So this one's the best for us because it enables us to afford all the capital expenses we need, both the top and the bottom line expenses, but it's the most burdensome on the ratepayer. After 5 years in FY25, they'd be paying, and this again is the average, so it'd be different for each customer. They'd be paying $13.27 more per month if we increased it at this rate. All right, let's move to scenario number 3. Scenario number 3, those same standard assumptions. A 10% reduction in revenue because of lost consumption and lost collection. In this case, the in-town customer would pay 2% more per year for the next 5 years, but we'd also raise the rate on our wholesale customers to $2.19 in the first year and to $2.28 in the second year. This would match Wilkesboro's rates for their wholesale customers. In FY22, in subsequent years, theirs is going to go up a little more. So their wholesale customers, after a couple years of our rates being level, are going to see an additional increase. Whereas in this proposal, we'd stay the same for the next few years. As you can see here, the dollar impact on the average, and I should have put this condition in there, on the average in-town household would be a more manageable $1.15 in FY21 and $5.86 in FY25. I don't know what the impact would be on the average Rural Water Association household because I don't know what kind of markups each of those associations puts on the water once they resell it from us. So let's take a look at this one. As you can see, a big increase in the current year because our in the next year, because our wholesale customers are paying more. Remember, when it was just the in-town customers, that was 15,000. Now it's several hundred. And as you can see, this adds up nicely over the next 5 years. So that one sounds pretty good, but it's based on assumptions that we're not confident we can expect. So that's what takes us into rate scenario number 4. Same increase to in-town customers, same increase to wholesale customers, same so the same impact on their household. But in this case, we are projecting a 20% reduction in collections. And like that last one was good, this one's bad. We'd be running a deficit next year. And we'd be eat through our capital reserve fund by FY26. So, this one's unlikely in the long term. I don't think consumption would be down 20% for each of the next 5 years. But this just paints a picture of how dependent on consumption our budget is in the water and sewer area. So those are the 4 scenarios I have. Again, just meant to illustrate what turning each different knob will do on our budget. If there's another scenario you want to consider, for example, keeping the base rate flat and only moving the consumption rate, we can do that. But perhaps the safer thing to do in this situation would be to run a scenario where the consumption rate stays the same and the base rate goes up, because that way that's assured money. Any different scenario you guys want to consider, we can do. Stop. So I'll pause there for any comments or questions.
Wilson, the thought that I have on this is that, first of all, I think the rate number, the scenario 3 is a more fair scenario, because I don't really believe that all of the in-town water users should have to bear the burden of what we need to keep the water flowing for all the people that use our water in town and out of town. The other thing that I have a question of is, if we were to choose one of these scenarios as our basis of budget proposal, that doesn't mean that next year, upon having actually experienced an FY scenario where we would have more concrete numbers, whether we had losses or gains, that we couldn't change it next year, correct? Can't hear Wilson.
Commissioner, that's true of the in-town rates for sure. We can change those anytime we want, every year if we wanted to. The wholesale rates are a little more complicated because those are codified in contract, and the contract has the terms under which we can raise the rates. And so there's an arduous procedure we have to go through in order to notify them, set the rates, tell them what the rates are going to be, wait for the term of the contract, wait for us to get to the term of the contract. And so I think there's a path to doing that, but it's a little more difficult than the regular in-town rates. And so really what you want to do is you want to set their rates. And of course it can be a graduated increase like I've proposed here, and let those ride for a handful of years just because they're more complicated to change. The other thing about that is we also have to worry about competition. Those folks are our customers, and they can walk away. I don't think that they will, because they're not going to get a better rate anywhere else, and because we're providing a service that they need. But conceivably they could leave us and we'd be in big trouble then. But we got to be thoughtful about making sure that whatever we charge them is fair and within the sort of market rate, so to speak, for that service.
Wilson,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry,
Michael.
Robert.
No, go ahead, Michael.
But if I heard you correct, Wilson, on that scenario 3, the wholesale rate by FY22 would be equal to what Wilkesboro's rate would be at FY22, with the understanding that you think Wilkesboro's rate is going to actually increase for their out-of-town consumers. So we are not, if we adopted scenario 3, we are not actually putting ourselves competitive wise out of the marketplace. And is that what I heard you say? We would still be competitive if they were looking to purchase water somewhere else?
So Connie, do you have that information on their rates?
That was hard to get.
Okay.
I emailed it to you. I've got the residential, but I don't know that the bulk rate was on there. It was,
Okay.
nothing was on their website that I could find. I had to go to the dashboard.
Right. So we'll find that out, Commissioner Parsons, what the timing and the amount of their rate increase is going to be, but it is going to go up over the next few years. Even though we could match them step for step, there's one case in particular where I think I could make a case for keeping ours a little bit below theirs, and that's which one is it we share with them, Dale? West Wilkes?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
There's one of them that we share with them, and we might want to charge them a little bit less so they'll do business with us rather than with them.
We also share Broadway Water
Oh,
Association.
yes, thank you, Dale.
That's true. Michael and Wilson and Dale, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the rate, one of the, or the most important rate that we need to try to keep to a level that we can keep those people on board is the one, the down 268 with Mountain View in that area, because they can what's the name of that group, Dale, down there? They can go to Rhonda and buy through Rhonda from Elkin, and there's been some talk about that. Dale, you're aware of that, and I don't know, Wilson, if you've been
Which one is that there?
The Water Association 260.
The Blue Ridge Water
Blue Ridge
Association.
Water. Yeah.
They have an interconnect with water coming from the town of Elkin
Yeah.
through Rhonda.
So
We've got an excellent working relationship with all of our neighbors that purchase water from us. And I know we want to treat them fair, but they do understand we've got to operate also.
they do.
I don't think that these increases that Wilson has proposed is out of reason.
No, I don't either, but I think we need to be, to Michael's point, we need to be careful of how much we do go up on some of them, because that Blue Ridge Water Association is a big consumer to our water that we sell. Very
Yes,
big.
yes, they are. They're good neighbors.
Yeah. I just
Well,
thought
I mean, Robert, to that point, that's what my whole thing is with the scenario 3, it kind of shifts the burden of the rate increase to the group as a whole, you know, in town and out of town. We all are in this together.
right.
The only other thing I was making sure that is if we chose a scenario, it's not engraved in stone. We could revisit it next year once we have this current year's consumption rates a little, because we don't know what the consumption rate's going to be. I mean, everything
That's
with
correct.
this whole budget Tuesday and today and everything is making assumptions of things that we have no clue as to what the reality is going to be. So that's my whole thing is
Right.
I like the idea of everybody's in this together. You know, I'd rather show small increment increases, especially in this upcoming fiscal year, where it just looked like everybody was sharing the load a little more than just one particular group.
I agree. I understand what you're saying, Michael. And I don't, I'm in agreement with that, but we need to, as you said, be cautious and not be fair to everybody, I guess is what you're trying to say, and I'm saying too. I'm trying to say it that way anyway.
So the one piece of information that I'll add, and I don't know if this will make much difference, but I just want to offer it, and that is, I'm presuming that we would charge the same rate to each of the 4 associations. I think that's the best practice. That's what I'm going to recommend.
Yes, right.
But technically, we don't have to do that. We could each charge them a different rate if we wanted to.
Wilson, this is Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I feel like regarding the whole thing, I mean, it's unfortunate that you ever have to go up on rates, particularly when we may be in a recession and our community may have people losing jobs, even if it's a little bit more. But when you look at the infrastructure, we have things we have to do, and it's something that looks like we're going to have to do. And I agree with Michael and what he was saying about, you know, the whole system taking on the burden versus in-town people. Not to mention, when you look at these numbers of the scenarios in here, even scenario 2, that is just the in-town thing, although it did gain us money, in scenario 3, the capital reserve fund is about 650,000 more than it is at year 5 than scenario 2. So that's good too. And I think that regarding the wholesale cost, it seems like we just need to kind of have a handle on what the fair market quote unquote value is, being with the Wilkesboro wholesale rates and the stuff from Elkin y'all are mentioning, just to make sure we don't have anybody and lose a customer, so to speak. But if Dell says that it's within reason, I would say that probably they would understand that. But that's kind of my take on it.
Yes, sir.
You certainly don't want to get into a dogfight, because I can tell you, and Dale can too, that scenario of being equal and fair is the best policy that I feel like, and I believe you guys do too, the best policy, because we've been through some dogfights with the Mulberry Fairplains folk in my tenure and my time in service. And we certainly don't need to get back into stuff like that. And I'm in total agreement with what Michael is saying, and we need to keep it on a fair playing field, level playing field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we might could, you know, if we were using scenario 3 where we were trying to spread the burden out across the broad spectrum, I mean, again, you don't necessarily have to have the hard number for the wholesale rate, because, I mean, even if you know, you could change it, you know, an increment, you know, a small amount, so that we are going to look, you know, more favorable to the customers that we currently have, as opposed to them looking for somewhere else. But still, that's still spreading the burden, so that, okay, so we don't grow the capital reserve fund quite as rapidly, but we also are still gaining enough income to do the projects that we need to do, because
Right.
you know, ultimately our projects are going to make for a better product and a more efficient processing. So you know, that benefits all the customers in town and out of town long term anyway.
That's correct.
I mean, I would present this to Dale. You know, Dale, what is your thoughts as far as increasing the wholesale rate? I mean, do the numbers that Wilson has kind of thrown in scenario 3, you know, these customers, you think they would be a revolt or a big pushback if we were looking at that kind of increase for those wholesale rates? I mean, what's your feeling? You've dealt with these guys for years.
Well, I like the idea of going up on them gradually, like Wilson has suggested, doing it over 2 years instead of doing it all at one time. But I do feel it's reasonable. I'm not saying we won't hear some backlash from them, but I don't think they've got a better option. And we do have to cover our expenses at the water plant. And like you said, it's not fair for the taxpayers of North Wilkesboro to bear all the burden.
Yeah, that's a point that we've tried to get beyond, Dale. And I agree with you. It's not fair for us to bear all the burden. And I think we have a pretty good, I'm going to say, I think we have a good relationship with all of our out of town customers. And whatever, we need to try to keep that going on and work toward that. And I believe we'll be okay. I agree with you, Dale.
Angela and Debbie, I'd like to hear kind of what y'all's thoughts is on this because y'all have been kind of quiet. So I'd love to hear what you guys were thinking about this.
You know, we've talked in several board meetings that we are where we need to raise our water rates just for the fact that we don't meet any grants at this point. So I like the idea, like you, Michael, that it shares across the board. You know, my rates are going up a little bit, your rates are going up a little bit. People out in West Wilkes, their buying water is raising a little bit. And I think that's very fair. I think people appreciate us being fair and forthright and, you know, putting it out there, what's going to happen. So I think scenario 3 is a good plan.
And I too like scenario 3. We have talked for years about the upcoming likelihood we were going to have to raise rates, and that time is here. And I think if people understand why the rates are being raised, then they may not like it, but I think they go along and understand what's happening. And, you know, we also heard sewer rates needed to go up. And I guess that's a conversation for another day, but this is a start. And I do think it's most fair for our citizens and the out of town users to all pay an increased rate.
Commissioner Ferguson, my proposal does include an increased sewer rate as well.
Oh, it does. Is it on here, Wilson?
Well, just know that on the in-town rate line, when I said a 2% increase, I was talking about that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Wilson, it's
Was
Andrew.
Bert ever able?
Yes, Bert is here.
Oh, okay, good.
Wilson,
Yes, sir.
is this a thing where it's appropriate to reach out to, say, the Blue Ridge group or whoever that's near Rhonda and say, hey, we think we're going to have to raise rates? I mean, and kind of find out where people.
So let me describe to you the contractual process that we're required to go through when we want to raise rates with at least 2 of them, but we're doing it for all 4 just so we can make it easier. 2 of our 4 contracts require that we notify them that we are considering raising rates. I think something like 90 days before we actually do it. So we passed that period. We have sent them that notification. And then we're required contractually to give them 45 days notice that we're going to raise it. And that deadline is actually May 15th. And so one of the things I was going to mention later, but I'll mention it now, is that we'll actually need to approve. I'll need for you all to approve rate increase at our next meeting on the 5th of May, so that we can notify them of the increase before the contractual deadline. So actually, before we approve the budget as a whole, I'll need you all to commit to this rate increase so that we can do that.
Wilson, you broke up on that on my computer. Would you state that again, please?
We have to notify them by May 15th of what the rate increase is going to be. And so I'll need the commissioners to approve the rate increase at our next meeting.
Does this require a public meeting also to raise the rates?
Danny, can you comment on that? I don't think it does.
I don't believe so. Hello?
Yes, we got it. We heard.
Okay, sorry, I didn't. I thought it was muted.
So,
This is Dale. I actually hand delivered the letter to all the water associations about our intentions to raise the rates in the future a couple weeks ago. And 3 of the 4 associations stated that they had expected a rate and actually rate increase. And actually a couple of them said, well, we figured you'd have done it last year. So they all are aware of the rate increase coming.
Wilson, is this something that you just need guidance from us today to say, let's move with this scenario? Or, I mean, what's our,
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
Yes, sir. So I wanted to make sure that you all were amenable to the sort of conditions of, your chosen scenario. And that's what I'll put in the formal budget proposal that's coming up in a few weeks.
Bert, what's your thoughts? Bert, mash the space bar on your computer. That'll work. Just mash like you were.
There we go. Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, I believe that the Steve asked him to. I will say that the need toward is up going. This the rate, and I do feel that does did a lead to the down. I think he said not, but if I can't hear, if you came in, I think you then go stat. So if you hear anything, I don't know. But, I think the 2 stand is best with red is date and less than not stand. As let's see. I can't see.
Yes, sir.
You can understand.
so Wilson,
Yes, sir.
in a nutshell, I think it's fair that we put our wholesale rate into what I would consider a fair market value with other people selling water around us, whether it be Wilkesboro and Elkin. I mean, being a little lower than them is not maybe a bad thing, so nobody walks away, but there's no reason we should have to be a lot lower.
Right.
Either.
What I'll do is I'll use scenario 3 as my sort of working template, but we'll explore the terms of Wilkesboro and their increase over the next few years, and what Elkin's rates are. And if we find that 228 is significantly below that, then I might come back to you and say, oh, we might want to adjust it upwards a little bit. But I think that that's going to be pretty close to what the market rate is.
Also, Wilson, this is Andrew. If we did go with a scenario like that and we found out that consumption was maybe down 20%, which is probably not likely, but we could, if we absolutely had to, adjust the in-town rates, just not the wholesale rate. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, yes to the in-town rates. We could adjust those next year. I think, but I'm not sure. I might need Danny to consult me on this, that there's a narrow path we could follow to raise them in the current year. But I'm not sure about that. But the wholesale rates, since those are set by contract, we would have to include a clause in the contract that indicated that we would, if there was some sort of triggering event, that we would need to raise it again in the middle of the contract term. And currently they don't contain such a clause. And so in order for us to be able to raise those mid-year, or if there was some sort of emergency, we would have to factor that into our negotiation with them over the next months.
That's pretty much spot on, Wilson. Of what you just said, Danny can address it, but that's the way I've understood it ever since we've been in these contract agreements.
How long are in Moore and Midnight, excuse me, Marie?
The terms of the contract are 4 years.
One of them was 5 years, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Was one?
5.
And when you talk about loss of consumption, that includes not just people using less water, but if people didn't pay a bill or something? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir. So the terms of the lengths of the terms are different for each contract. And we're actually in the midst of renewals on a couple of them.
Right.
And so these aren't the full contracts, but just the renewal periods that we're in.
With merely, excuse my me, but Ledger, I can't, matter. I can't hardly.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Ledger, I can't say it, but Missouri and Rossetti. I can't get it, but I can't. That's all right. It's all right. That's all right.
So Danny and I have talked about the procedure for renegotiating the terms rather than just the rates. And we both agreed that that would be a cumbersome process. And so we might not have the time or the sort of patience to do that right now. And, that could risk their, tolerance of the increase we're going to ask them to pay. And so I would not propose trying to renegotiate all the terms right now. But if you all feel strongly and you want to put that sort of stopgap in there, we can do it. But it'll be a complicated process.
I wouldn't mess with that.
Me either.
Me either.
I think it kind of kills the discussion we just had about we're all in this together. Because I really think it takes some goodwill out of it.
Good point.
That's the point.
If our consumption figures were way down and we weren't going to make these figures here, we would have to, like we'd look to the undesignated fund balance for our general fund, we'd probably pay these capital expenses out of our capital reserve fund in the water and start to dial that one down before we were ready. And then talk about rates again during budget season next year. There is one other possibility, and of course this would apply only to the in-town people, but we could include in our budget a trigger that says if we fall below a certain threshold of consumption, we're going to raise again mid-year. Those are complicated and stressful for the consumer, and so I wouldn't do those under normal conditions. And then also this whole notion of not balancing our checkbook on the back of the consumer, would speak against that, but that's not unheard of. There are some towns that have, triggering events sort of written into their rate that they could use if their consumption falls below a certain amount.
Yeah, but I don't particularly care for that thought process because again, we're trying to sell the positive here that we're in this together. We need this increase so that we can provide a good, clean, safe product. Everybody bears the same amount of burden. So I think to complicate it or convolute it with, basically is, stopgap measures and things like that. I think trying to just sell it to the consumer, keep it simple. And that way, you know, we can always address anything in the future as it arises, you know, but to automatically assume worst case scenario is going to happen as opposed to, you know, I'd rather react to it if it did happen as opposed to go ahead and plan for a doomsday scenario.
I agree.
You know,
I agree,
I think it sets a, I think it's a better sell to just leave it like this and say, hey, we're all gonna, you know, absorb this. It's not gonna be, I mean, if the truth be known, you're talking about, especially in the first year, the price of a McDonald's cheeseburger per month increase. So it's, I think it's an easier sell than, you know, saying, well, you know, if it doesn't do this, we got to do that. So that's just my thought.
Yes, sir.
I agree. I agree, Michael.
I agree with that too. If something catastrophic happens, then we'd have to address it then, and I would assume everybody would understand that because this stuff doesn't happen by magic. Or does it, Dale?
Dale has a magic wand, Andrew. You better watch him. He's pretty sharp. Darn good and sharp.
Marty, we got you on here twice now, man. All right, well, so that's pretty much it. It sounds like there's support to move ahead with scenario 3, to also investigate what the market rate is for other wholesalers around us. And depending on what I find out there, maybe bring that back to you and we talk about that a little more, but more or less support for moving ahead with scenario 3.
Yes.
Okay, will do. Does anyone, and looks like we'll be done in time for the governor's press conference. Does anyone else have any closing comments or questions or remarks that they want to make?
I have one question about that whole dredging thing that we do down on the Reddy's. That's done once a year, correct, Dale?
We did do it a couple years in a row. We haven't done it this year, and I don't think we're going to. We're pursuing some grant money, maybe to do a larger dredging project. We're going to see how the grant money comes along. We've also been opening the gates on the dam more often and releasing water right there at the intake. It's been helping us some, but we're hoping to get some grant funds to help us with a large dredging project.
So the 55,000 that's in the budget, in the hard costs that's in this upcoming year, that is for dredging that was done in previous years?
No, that actually would be for some matching funds. If we did get a grant, there would be like a 10% match or something. And I'm also sure there would be some planning that would have to be done by an engineer before the project started. It would have costs for that also.
So that one might tick up a little bit depending on what the cost of the project would be, what our matching portion would be. But this is the ballpark figure what we budget.
So what does the dredging normally cost to do what's been done over, because I think y'all dredged it for about the last 3 years at least, haven't you?
We had a huge we had that huge project, Dale, that I think Hank was still here when we did it. And that wasn't that about $350,000?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And here lately, we've been spending about $50,000 a year dredging. So if the grant money don't come through, we'll still have enough just to clean out from around our intake anyway in this upcoming year's budget.
Yeah, I was just curious because that, you know, I was I saw that in the budget as a hard cost, and I was just making an inquiry about it.
Dale, this is Andrew. Can you hear me?
I can.
Has that always had to been I mean, have we always had to dredge there, like historically, since the beginning of that dam? Or is that
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can
Yes.
remember it being dredged when I first come to work for the town. But it does seem like the erosion has got worse over the years and it fills up quicker than it used to.
That's what I was thinking, because I used to go there as a kid, and like it seems like now an island forms down there. Is that's what it is that you're getting out, right?
That's correct. And used to years ago, when the water demand wasn't as high, they would open those gates every Sunday on that dam
Mm-hmm.
and flush the reservoir out. And that helped quite a bit too. And we do still do that some, but we can't do it weekly like it used to be done.
Well, in my opinion, and I think part of this is caused the silt and all that comes in is because of all the timber that's been cut above up the Reddish River. And what's happened, you have more when you have rain, heavy rains, you have more debris, you have more dirt, silt and stuff washing down in there than you had back in the earlier years, Dale, when you and I first started in with the town. And we never had to dredge that often. And in my opinion, that's one reason we didn't. All this clear cutting and strip cutting they've done on the Reddish up that way, just drive up that way and you can see where they've just clear cut. And that allows more debris and silt and stuff to wash in down there to the dam.
So this is one of these issues that's, fought over at the COG all the time, because most of that clear cutting and, contribution to this silt is coming from way upstream in the county and in the other counties, wherever the source of the waters is. Wilkesboro has it at Cub Creek and Moravian Creek and all the waters that flow into their town. And so the towns are always interested in having the state, help prevent that, but the jurisdictions along the source of the waters don't want to stifle economic activity. So they resist, regulation and other things that could be put into place to stop that kind of thing. That push and pull is constantly being fought over, in our regional forums.
Are we ready
That's all I had.
Are we ready to adjourn, Wilson?
I am.
All right, I need a motion.
Oh, one more thing. Well, I got you all. I plan on working from home tomorrow. So if you need to call me, please call my cell phone.
Okay. I have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, close out your screens and have a rest of a blessed and great evening. And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.